So if you have any questions or comments, put them in the chat. I will start addressing them, but we won't be doing anything really busy until after the top of the hour. So, also, I did post the templates. There is a stream called Docs Platform Templates and Workspaces, and in it I posted what should be all of them. But here's a link to that message. So it is in the chat here in Zoom. And that should be all of them. If you're setting up TOS, sometimes you need to first set up the workspace and then load the grids separately. And if you have that issue, just ping me here in this stream, and I'll give you a share for the grid itself. But I don't like to do that unless someone thinks they need it, because otherwise they just install the grid and not the workspace. And if you know Thinkorswim, you'll know the difference. So again, if you're just coming in, I did post in the Zoom chat, I'll post it again, a link to it. There's a new stream I created in the Scalpathon that has my templates in it, because people always ask about that. If you want to use those, feel free. I don't like do technical support on any of that stuff, but if you have a question or two, I always try to answer it. You can just put it in that same stream. Do you guys ever encounter issues with DayTrader when saving a workspace, then reopening it? Yeah. The one issue I ever have with DayTrader is the first few times you change something in your workspace, it will sometimes reopen wrong. You have to save it. And there's a simple reason for that. I don't know if it's a good explanation, but it's a simple reason, which is Jigsaw uses a third-party plugin that manages where windows are and where they're saved, and it's cloud-based, and it takes time to update. Sometimes, once or twice saving something. So that is a really good question, and I do run into it all the time. There's a couple of little quirks like that in Jigsaw, and that's probably the most annoying one. But again, once you've saved it a few times, it pretty much stops doing that. What I always do, I have a couple of best practices with respect to that. So this is a really good suggestion if you use Jigsaw. So when I have a workspace I save it, and then the instant next thing I do is I save a copy of it as the name of that workspace, and then BAK for backup. And that way, if anything goes wrong with a workspace during a session, I can just open the backup of it. And that way, it will, save the layout properly. And so that's another shortcut around that, Sebastian. Let's see. Okay, Jigsaw messes up the... Exactly. That's the problem. Yeah, exactly. And that's why I just make a backup of everything. And that way, if there's a Jigsaw problem, I just open the backup workspace, because again, he uses a third party for that window management stuff. And every now and then it burps and it screws up your layout, or it puts something on a different monitor, or it flips the trade window back to horizontal from vertical. Those are things that happen over and over again. Okay. Yeah, everything is stored in XML and Jigsaw, and the XML gets corrupted is basically what happens. I have one installation of Jigsaw, the one on my little computer, that I've reinstalled it a number of times. I've cleaned everything up, and every time it loads, there's two lists of my trades. The P&L list. One of them not in the format that I save, and then the other one in the correct format. It always opens up this ghost second one, and I've actually talked to Peter about this, and he's like, and it's a bug. It's really hard to find and fix. Just close it. and then on my other computer, it doesn't do that. So, go figure. Ken, let's see. You don't need to send that to me privately. Please make all questions be public. So Jay asked me, can we use DayTrader to work off the same data feed that comes with a quote unquote prop account? You mean an evaluator account? And the answer is yes. But you have to use the plugin to do that. And there's good explanations of it on the Jigsaw site. Basically, that's a rhythmic problem. If you're going to run two applications on the same computer and you want them both to connect to the Rhythmic account, you have to enable plugins on Rhythmic. So that's the first thing you have to do. Here, I'll show you real quick what that looks like. So when you open RTrader Plus, allow plugins. See that right there? You have to turn that on. That's the first thing. And then in the platform, you have to do the same thing. You have to tell Jigsaw, or if you're going through NinjaTrader to Jigsaw, you have to tell NinjaTrader, and I'll show you that on Ninja because I happen to have it running right now. I'm not sharing my screen. Yes, I just realized that as I went to see the second part of that. All right, so anyway, this is what I'm talking about. On the RTrader Pro login, see right here, it says allow plugins. That has to be turned on. And then in Ninja or Jigsaw or whatever program you're trying to run at the same time, you will see there's a checkbox for that. So like Lilu Rhythmic and see plug-in mode right there. So you use the same credentials, but that has to be checked, and it has to be checked on RTrader Pro. And it's the same thing if you're looking at Jigsaw. It has a little item like that too. That's an option. If you go to any of the, again, depending if you're connecting Jigsaw through NinjaTrader, you don't need to worry about it. If you're connecting directly to Jigsaw, it has a checkbox on the data connection just like that. Okay, so does that answer your question, Jay? Yes, thank you. Okay, cool, Jay. All right. Anyway, cool, Jay. That sounds like your rapper name. Anyway, so let's get started. Welcome, everybody. This is our final and our wrap-up session, and it basically is free form. There's a couple of things I want to accomplish. I'm going to talk about drills. I'm going to talk about the participation. Yes, any platform, Jay, that connects to Rhythmic. That's how you do it. And in Sierra Chart, same way. You have to enable the ability for plugin mode, which keeps Rhythmic from logging you out when more than two applications, well, more than one, try to log into it at the same time. So that's what it's doing. It's saying, okay, you're really just one computer, so I'll, using the same ID, so I'll let you both log in.
Hang on, Tradeovate doesn't connect to Rhythmic. Tradeovate is its own island, isn't it?
I thought Tradeovate with the evaluators does connect through Rhythmic. Does it not?
No, they're using Tradeovate Sim.
Oh, that's right. They are. So, all right. So I don't know the answer to that. So yes, thank you for clarifying.
Tradeovate will support multiple accounts from different, in quotes, providers.
Okay. But the question is, if you've got a Rhythmic, you can you, so you can't connect Tradeovate to Rhythmic. I never tried. So
no, I think Jay's asking, could he use Tradeovate on, say, a cash account and an eval account? Yeah, but you might have different logins.
Okay, got it. And I'll tell you this, Jay, I would avoid Tradeovate like the plague. It's absolute garbage. It's total garbage. I mean, garbage isn't a good enough word for what it's a cloud version of a 15-year-old platform that didn't work well when it was, in its heyday. So, people get it because, well, you can trade on your phone and, it's got a mobile. And again, you shouldn't be doing that with this style of trading anyway. That, cellular connection or even a Wi-Fi connection it has too much latency. The information going back and forth takes too much time. So, you want to be on a plugged in Ethernet connection if you're going to be a scalper. I can't emphasize that enough. I blew up 5 Apex accounts in one trade once because I went to a friend's house. I set up my computer, really powerful, fast Wi-Fi. I forgot about the latency issue, and I was anxious to start a class. I had just arrived there. This was when I was in Tacoma last year. And so, and I even brought a 100-foot cable to plug in. I just hadn't done it yet. And I had a P&L showing me plus $500 in all 5 accounts. And I went to flatten it out, and it was minus $3,000. That's how much the latency can impact you, just how long it takes to talk to the router and back. I plugged in on that exact same network, and I didn't have another problem, except I'd blown up the 5 accounts, not realizing there was that much of a problem with Wi-Fi latency. So yeah, don't trade on Wi-Fi. Don't trade on your phone. You can watch the market, but if you're going to try to scalp, you need to be plugged in. And even like Lee's stuff, even being plugged in is too much latency. Lee rents server space right next to Chicago, so the latency is 2 milliseconds or 5 milliseconds. That's the right answer. So I have to emphasize that. And you couldn't pay me to use Tradeovate with your money. I tried and tested it for years, because I would have liked it to work, but it is not a good enough platform to do this on. The bid-ask data is crap. The footprints are crap. The workspaces don't stay where you want them to be. The SIM doesn't work properly. There's all kinds of data lags. I honestly cannot say anything about it that is good. And I actually had a headbutting with the CEO of Tradevate over this. So, I guess that's relevant background information, but I was just being honest with my review, and he accused me of being a ninja trader. What's the word? A promoter of Ninja Trader, and I barely use Ninja Trader. Jigsaw is my primary platform, so that shows. I think he was drinking that night. He sent me some really nasty emails. Anyway, okay. So let's go on and do our wrap up. So today I have a couple of missions. First of all, and foremost, we just finished 2 weeks of 17 live classes and whole kinds of information. And, remember, I promised you it would be a fire hose of information. And I think we have achieved that, the fire hosing. So what questions can I answer? What isn't clear? And, I want to start with this, and then I want to talk about what are good next steps for you guys, and things like drills and perhaps TRG membership. We have a special deal going for you. And I'm going to have to defer one thing. I had planned to announce gift card winners today. I have a data problem on that one. I have to go back and look at it. But I'll tell you right now, we didn't have a Mr. or Miss Congeniality. Nobody was really outwardly interacting with other people in a helpful way. And sometimes we get and sometimes we don't. So that's not the end of the world. We had some really good questions. And I think what I'm going to do is split up the winners of the questions and give maybe 2 25s instead of a 50. But I have to go back and look at a couple of things. And I thought I'd be able to do that for the session, but I had a little emergency this morning and I couldn't. So I promise you that I will do that, and I will post it in the pit by Monday in the Scalpathon stream, and I will email the people that applies to. But I do want to say, while I'm on that topic, that I really did appreciate the interaction and the questions. And I also understand those of you that just lurk and listen. I get that too. But, when you're presenting this way virtually, it really is nice to have any questions. And when you get really good ones, and we had some really, really good questions. So anyway, there's like 3 people. I'm trying to narrow it down to 2. Maybe I'll give three partial awards. I don't know. I got to go back and read it again when I'm awake, which I am now. So I promise you we will do that. Okay. No other questions, really? Okay. Well, let me start some topics that maybe will create some questions. People always ask me, when you have seen and are trying to learn a technique, and that's what this is a technique, then how do you get better at it? How do you improve? What's the path? And I always put this up there because there's nothing more true. It's about practice. Now, the problem for most people with this statement is that looks really cool on a meme with, Bruce Lee there, but how do you do that? How do you practice? And that's a really good question. So there's a couple of ways, and drills are one of them. And there's a whole lot of drills. Depending on what you're doing right and wrong and what you know right away, where you are in your learning curve is what I mean. There's a lot of different ways to approach drills, but I think the best ones, if you're going to learn scalping, to play around with, and I talked about this in the risk management videos, particularly if you want to learn swarming, I think the best 2 drills are 1-tick drills in the ES, or, the equivalent over in NQ, which is like 4 ticks. I think that's really good. And I think probably the best one is what's called a cut and reverse drill by most people, or an always in drill. And basically the way that works is you assign yourself some amount of size you're willing to play. It doesn't matter. Pick a number, 5 NQ or 50 MNQ. Just give yourself a bucket of contracts you can trade. And then at any given moment, you have to be in the market. So you can't not be in the market. You have to always either be long or short. What you can do to manage risk is scale those contracts that you have at your disposal up or down. So the rules are really simple. You have to have one contract, either long or short, all the time. But at any given point, you can go up to whatever the limit you created for yourself was. Say it's 50 contracts. And I would do this in micros, and I would use something like that, 1 to 50 micros. Give yourself a lot of room, because the purpose of the drill is, you don't want to blow up whatever your limit is. So give yourself some sort of a loss limit. And other than that, it's just about trying to stay focused on which side of the market should you be on and how aggressively. And because you always have to be in the market with at least one contract, you always have to be paying attention. But if nothing is going on and it's kind of just working a range or something like that, then the question is, well, which way should that one be? And it really helps you learn to do this quickly by being forced to make that decision. Okay, I have to be long or short right now, just one. But if I want to, if I want to really, not lose money and make money over the course of the drill, I'm going to have to scale up from there. But I'm going to have to be careful where I do it and which way. Right? You can reverse the position anytime you want. So you can have 10 on long and go to 1 short. But something has to be on all the time. That's the only rule. I find that drill is the best at helping people understand the idea of which way you should be going at any given point, and that there's degrees of aggressiveness, in terms of your scaling. Because if you think about it, let's say you're looking, the market's going down, but you're thinking there's a long down there somewhere. As long as, and this is kind of the math of swarming, as long as you're doing it at some sort of extreme, and as long as you pace the rate that you scale at, you ought to be able to make that trade work. But it takes a lot of practice, and you're teaching your brain how to manage an equation that's really important. And it's a simple equation, but people don't think this way when they're trading. You have to manage the difference between the expected value of your idea and the risk of your idea. And that's what you're doing when you're doing that drill. You're juggling back and forth, but you're being forced to make a decision. You can't sit on your hands. You can't be no trade. And that's why it's such a good drill. It really forces you to understand when you're wrong and how you can manage your way around that. You saw me do this a number of times during the Scalpathon. I'm bringing this up because I want to emphasize it. There was a couple of cases where I got reasonably offside for having, such good track record and such a good win rate and all that. And I still managed to make it either not do a lot of damage or make it profitable. And the way I did that was a couple times, for example, I would say, okay, I like this idea. It's not working, but it could go lower where I like it more, but I already have too much size on. So on a bounce, I'm going to take some off. Even though I'm not profitable yet, I'm scaling out a little bit so that I have more flexibility if it continues to work the extreme. And I did that twice. And in both cases, I think it was probably the most educational thing you can see, because, it looks really good when I get in a trade and it's a winner right away and boom, I make, X amount of money and everybody's impressed. Wow, good trade. Yeah, that's nice. But that's not as educational. What's educational is, okay, how and where are you wrong? Because as a new trader, the best instinct to develop is to get flat right away when you're wrong. But with this style of trading and swarming, that's actually a bad idea in most cases, as long as you're not going in too hard too soon into a really bad idea. And so, again, back to the drills, the cut and reverse drill, always in drill, really forces you to understand what that feels like at extremes and what's an extreme. Where is an extreme? I gave you some really good ways to measure that. There's many of them. You heard in the structural session that we did on Thursday, Lee uses ATRs in addition to the standard deviations of the VWAP. And that's just as legitimate. There's a lot of legitimate ways to measure extreme. Just make sure, you're using ones that make sense to you. We've given you a couple of them, and I think they're good ones. But, extreme is something you have to practice, and there's relative degrees of extremeness. And that makes a really big difference in this style of trading. You can have a 51%, you can have a 40% win rate, but if your winners are just dramatically bigger than your losers, that's a profitable model. And most of the people that I know that trade that way tend to trade, they either take losses really fast and just, a winner has to be really obvious, or they kind of do what I'm saying, where, they like to trade extremes and they tend to be flexible with the scaling there. And so, you might have some losers, but the winners are just going to be so much dramatically bigger. And over time, you can get the losers way down too, because again, this style almost distorts the win-loss rate idea, because, you get really close to 100% winners. And, how can that be? Well, it's because of the way you're managing risk, not because every idea was a good idea. And the quality of every trade idea is always relative. That's the idea of my poker hands, pair of tens, pair of aces, ace, king. Okay. So, what would doing this drill on NQ be more useful? Which drill are you talking about? You talking about the cut and reverse drill? I would only do that in NQ, because in ES you often get you often get almost no movement in ES. I think the only good drill in ES is one tick drills. I mean, there are some other ones, but in my opinion, and yes, so to answer your question, I'm absolutely talking about NQ, because NQ is the rubber band, and that's really why it's such a powerful tool to scalp, because it tends to give you so much movement to work with. And I've said this a couple of times, but it's worth repeating. If NQ moves 1% and ES moves 1%, the amount of movement within the 1% move in NQ will be very tradable every day. But in ES, a 1% move might be so tight, and the market's so thick, and it might be that you could trade it, but the range is so tight, it's just the opportunity cost is significantly greater than the expected value of any winners, and so it's harder to do. And again, this is what my buddy's analysis of markets we trade and the way we trade them, and our drawdown rules. Almost any trade works better in NQ than ES if you can manage the risk, because the opportunity is bigger. But the one tick drill, I think that is a premier ES drill, for the simple reason that I just said. ES is more, there's more of these little 3-tick algorithms running. And so if you can routinely go in and get a tick in ES, first of all, you can make money doing that. I do know people that do that, because, it's a net $8 every time, even at the highest commission rate. And that adds up. You can do that. You can scalp ES for 1 ticks, 4 or 5 at a time, if you're doing it at the right spot and you're good at it. It's a really good drill for that. But cut and reverse in NQ, much, much better. And there are a lot of other drills. Let me just be really clear on this. And what you're doing right and wrong kind of dictates what kind of drills you should do. And, that becomes more of like a coaching question. So, I try to answer these questions as generically and broadly as I can, but sometimes it's individual. And I've already mentioned a little bit throughout the Scalpathon. If you're interested at all in one-on-one coaching, I have a couple of inquiries already. You can either use the form on our website, or you can just drop me an email. And I will talk to you for free, and we'll kind of see how we get along, and if it's something that might make sense. Real quickly, let me just throw a couple of quick things in the chat here, since I just said that. Okay, this is our website, and this space right here, there's a little form you can fill out for any of us, and that's the quickest, easiest way to do it. If you're interested in that. So I'll just post that in the chat real quick there in Zoom. Okay, so that kind of covers my drills. I mentioned the winners. We will come back to that. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to bring up real quickly, this is a trainer thing. One of the rules of training or teaching or running a seminar like this, for example, when I teach other trainers, you should do this. There's a little mental word game for this. You should tell people what you're going to tell them, and then throughout the course of your event, tell them. And then when you're done, you should tell them what you told them. Review what we covered, and I think that's a good exercise. It also sometimes brings up some questions. So these bullet points were our objectives. And I think, learn 5 consistently profitable setups. I think we saw more than 5, but the 5 that I was meaning for you to see, we saw over and over again. And let me just kind of repeat what I mean. There's more than five, but the kind of five I was referring to here were simply, at the open, there's three. There's the open five, the 15-minute break, and then the initial balance, and the trading around the B-day to the initial balance. So there's a couple right there, at least three. The gaming the close, that one of my favorites. When that works, you can pass 150K evals in one day with the close. Yesterday was a really good example. We just had such a giant move. The problem with yesterday was it came before our live session by about a half an hour. But, this is the move I was talking about. We were drifting along SD2, and on a Friday, people have to take profits when we've been down all day. So short squeezes are really common, and boom, right back to the VWAP. I mean, that was just from 10 to 02. This was a 90 pointer. So, and unfortunately, like I said, it started right a half an hour before our closing class. So by the time the closing class was going, we were already pretty much into that trade. But that's a really common one. So that's the kind of the next one of the consistently profitable setups. And then intraday, anytime we are breaking a ledge, you can trade it, go with the break, or you can fade the break. In NQ and MNQ, I have never seen a ledge break that wasn't tradable, ever. They're always tradable. Some are better than others, but it's guaranteed movement, and it's a guaranteed possible retrace. And if there isn't a retrace, it's even better going the way it's going because it's got a lot of energy. So ledge breaks are by far the best one. If you just want to focus on one thing that happens over and over again, all times of the day or night, ledge breaks is the one to do. If you have a regular job and you can only trade the open, those three opening setups, particularly the 15-minute break, that's the easiest one to learn. The open five, people either kind of go with it or don't. That's like a personality thing. And then any trades around the initial balance are really good statistical trades. And guess what? Those initial balance breaks are almost always ledge breaks, which is why I say you get ledge break trades just over and over and over again. Were you going to say something, Lee, or somebody? Let's see. I thought I heard someone else. Somebody get unmuted by accident? No. Okay. No, Lee, you're muted too. All right. Anyway, I hope JVC's okay. Haven't heard from him. All right. So back to, so anyway, the point is we did a lot more than 5 setups, but if you're really going to focus on any of them, that's what I would do. I think ledge breaks are by far, for me anyway. And remember, a range during the rookie roast behaves very much like a ledge break trade. It's fairly predictable when we have a predictable range in the middle of the day, not the first 2 hours, not the last 2 hours. So, that's 8 setups for you there, but I promised 5, and we did more. And I think we got lucky. We had really good conditions and we saw lots of good examples. The Globex overnights were mixed. We had 2 that we happened to do on May Day, and then another one when the king caused the market to be closed. But the last one turned out to be a good night. So the last week's was excellent. And if you haven't seen the recording, that's a good example of what the overnights are like. Good opportunities when they come, but you have to be really patient, find something else to do. So anyway, I'm just kind of reading through all the things that we covered here, and the emphasis on a couple of things that can help game your entries. This is one I really want to come back and focus on. I tried to talk to this as much as I could. And then when we finally got the sound share working again and you could hear my telephone ringing at the open, I think that was a really good example of how the interaction between the equities and the futures, particularly if you're a scalper, particularly around these ledges and the open and the close, what the equities are doing right now, the tick and the NASDAQ tick, and where they are for the session, the advanced decline of those two things, is a really powerful kind of a filter to put on your scalp trades. And, again, in the live sessions, we saw that over and over again, where it can keep you from making a mistake and go the wrong way. And it can also really reinforce if you're going the right way or if you're fading at the right spot. And, a couple of examples of that were when we were at a low and the tick reversed and I was getting long. That's just, you're taking advantage of market generated information. And, you can't read too much into it, but remember, we're a derivative of the equities. If we're going down and the equities are going up, that can't continue forever. It will get too far apart, and the arbitrage of people trading both will bring it back together. So all you have to do is try to understand when that's happening, which one is likely to come back to which one. And and that's pretty easy to get the hang of if you, guess what, practice it. But at inflection points like ledges, it's easy to see that. If we're going down and it's just crushing the bid and we're making lower lows, and the broad market tick is minus 1,000 and the Nasdaq tick is minus 75, guess what? You don't want to be long yet. But boy, let's say you're down there and the market's gone into ebb and flow for the last few bars, and all of a sudden, the Nasdaq's back up to plus 10, and the broader market goes from minus 1,000 to plus 300. You can literally hit buy the market and catch some ticks there, particularly in NQ, because that's what it looks like right when it's reversing. It might go right on going down. It might continue going down 3 minutes later, but at that particular instant, it's a very asymmetric opportunity. And there's that word again. One of the things that we saw throughout the Scalpathon that I really have to repeat, and emphasize is, you have two missions when you're scalping. It's really fairly simple. If you can get the immediate next direction right, which way are we going, and are we going to keep going that way, or are we going to turn? That's really what you're looking to do. And if you find the right little filters to put that question through, you'll find yourself making good answers to that question. And then it's just risk management. And risk management in the world of, prop firms and funded accounts that you can buy $5,000 of drawdown for $160, that becomes real easy to calculate if you take your emotions out of the equation. I was just having this conversation with one of the people I coach one-on-one, and it's a really common behavior. I want to share this because I've done it. Everybody's done it that I know, where you get a funded account and you stop trading it the way you traded the eval, because you get nervous. It feels like it's real money. It is kind of real money. That whole, oh, now there's, now I could withdraw. And I used to think that way too. And I even caution people to be very careful and grow funded accounts slowly. In this new environment, the opportunity cost of getting a funded account is no longer 2 months and $300 of monthly fees and then $90 a month after that. It's a one-time fee, and your cost is predefined. So blowing them up is not the end of the world, particularly if you can pass them fairly easily, if your edge is good. So this is worth considering. I've had a couple of occasions where I've looked at a setup and it was so asymmetric. I've said, you know what? If this blows the account up, it's worth the risk because the opportunity going the other way is so big and it's real money, And so you just have to then game that with the odds, think in bets, and then make a decision whether you want to do it or not. But, even a year ago, that wasn't even a possible decision you could make. It was, if you worked, if you were doing the normal way to get to a funded account, it took 2 months. You had to trade for 20 days. There's only 20 days in a month, so a trading month. So unless you nailed the average every day with no losing days, you had to plan on 2 months. I used to tell people this in training sessions, and it was $175 a month. So the costs were so much higher, and it took a long time to get to that quote unquote funded account. Now you can do it in 5 or 10 days, and you can buy a bundle, which lets you blow up 4 times on the way to doing it. And you can buy a bundle and trade both ways at the same time. Getting yourself to a funded account is much less costly. The opportunity cost of it is much lower. So you have to think about that in terms of how much risk you're willing to take trading your funded account. And it's a valid question. So just a point I want to emphasize. Hopefully, I think we talked about swarming enough that everybody understands it and how it works. Are there any questions about that? I'm happy to go into them in more detail. And I want to talk a little bit about scalping around your job and when to use a copier or not. I talked about that in live sessions a lot. And you should never use a copier unless you're doing really well, and never start the day using the copier, because you make one mistake, you screw up 20 accounts or 5 accounts or whatever you have. Anyway, but let me come back to that. I see a question. What is my opinion on daily profit limit? Stop trading after you reach a determined PDA. Yeah, that's a great question, Renaud. And again, I have mixed feelings about it. In my experience, well, put it this way, if I'm trying to pass an eval or something like that, I tend to do it that way. I tend to think, well, I got to go 10 days anyway, so, $900 a day or whatever it is, $500 a day, $300 a day, whatever you're doing, whatever eval. Having said that, my most profitable days are the days I don't do that. Because when you're firing on all cylinders, when everything's working for you, when you're in the zone, you're reading the market and the conditions are favorable for your style of trading, why not keep going? I mean, you don't get that often. And so to just artificially say, well, I'm going to shut down is kind of silly. On the other hand, new traders often make the mistake of, not sensing that conditions have changed and they keep trading the same way and they end up giving it all back. So again, it kind of depends. The correct answer, I think, to this question depends on where you are on your journey. If you're a relatively new trader, it's not a bad idea. That's the right answer, what Sven just said. When you're no longer focused, that's when you should stop. But again, when you're new, that's not that easy to understand. Not everybody is good at evaluating their own capabilities at any given moment. It takes practice at that too. So, it's like, should you try to swarm when you are in a trade and it starts to go against you if swarming is justified there, or should you just take a small loss? And, as a new trader, it's a good habit to take a small loss, but you're never going to get consistently profitable doing that unless you have lots of winners. And that's a kind of hard edge to work. But if you have the kind of edge that you're going to be right or wrong, really obviously, and that's going to be at really extreme asymmetric points, and that's the style, then taking lots of small losses is death by 1,000 cuts. It's not worth doing that. You should either take it and be aggressive or not try it at all. And again, this is one of those things that takes practice to teach yourself how to do. And again, I always feel like a broken record with the practice thing, but there's no magic to any of this. As magic as I make it look, or Lee makes it look, this is really how it works. Once you understand the right things to do to make money, you have a profitable process, then it's just about staying in your process, because as humans, we tend to deviate from things. It's just our nature. I personally stop after predetermined P&L because I feel like I'm always, okay. So that is a very legitimate new trader's approach, Renaud, is I've hit my goal. I haven't made significant mistakes. I don't want to start making them. I'm done for the day. That's totally fine. As a full-time trader, when you've been doing it for 20 years, you'll get to the point where there's days you'll do that, and there's other days you'll say, wow, this is a good day. I could put up 10 grand today, or 15 grand today, or 20 grand, and go buy a new car, or whatever. And there's days when that happens. And so my technique is, if I'm making mistakes, I shut it down. But if everything is working and my brain's still dialed in, which as I get older, it's harder to stay dialed in. Like Sven said, that's a really good point. But that's kind of the way I do it. Good comments, good questions. Do you keep trading your account and make a big withdrawal in the 5th month? That depends on the account. So let's go back to the beginning of your question. Regarding the payout structure on Lulu, for example, being able to withdraw 2,000 max 4th month and making 1K nearly every day, how do you manage your accounts? Okay, do you trade a new account after the max amount limit? Do you keep trading and make big withdrawal the 5th month? Okay, I've done both here. And for me, maybe Lee wants to comment as well later. I don't know if he's busy. He may not be able to comment, but if he does, by all means, I'll tease it now. Jump in when I'm done with my thought on this, Lee. But my thought on this is simple. When I had the 25K accounts, a couple of times I did the accelerators, with the $600 static drawdown. And the only reason I did those was to see if I could get those to the withdrawal, which for those was 2,000, and withdraw it, and then just close them. And I did that with a bunch of those just to, it was just a great pat on the back. I just spent $200 or whatever, and I got 2,000, and let's go do that again. Because I find that the rules of those little 25Ks are just too restrictive for my style, So that was that. Now, as I've gotten to the bigger ones, I haven't gotten that far with any of the 150s yet, where I'm past the minimum withdrawals, and now what do I want to do? My sense with the 150s is I'd like to keep them because I like the amount of aggression that the drawdown lets me have. So I'll probably keep them well past that and withdraw the minimums and maximums I can for the first few months, and then see what I can do with it. There was a guy last year in Apex that withdrew over $1 million. And when I saw that, I was like, well, good job. And then my second reaction was, I need to beat him. So I have a thing going where it's just starting now, but I want to see if I can do that both at Apex and at Lilu. And to do that, you have to be copying a lot of accounts, first of all, and you have to keep them, and just keep growing them, because that gives you more room to be more aggressive. So that's kind of my plan on that. But I think everybody's a little bit different. I think it's a totally legitimate idea to, withdraw the money, do a 50, for example, like your example, and withdraw the maximums you can every time. And then when you get to the point where, you could withdraw more, see where you're at and make a decision. Maybe it makes more sense to trade your cash account with that money. But, with these evals being so cheap and easy to pass, it's hard to justify trading real money. I think it really is. You have so much more leverage. It's so little risk here. So that's my answer to that one. Let's see, Karsten, I do multiple sessions a day, so no longer than, yeah, that's another way to do that. And that's why I break the day up into time chunks, because, if I traded the overnight, I definitely won't trade till the open, but sometimes I'll wait till the rookie roast to trade again, or the close. And if I didn't trade overnight and I got up and, I'm pretty rested, I'll trade the open, because that one's hard. The open 5 is hard. It requires a lot of focus, and then maybe, take a break and trade the close. So yeah, that's why having setups around different times of the day is really nice when you're a full-time trader, because, I don't have to get up at any given time. I don't only trade the open. I don't only trade the first hour, so there's ledge breaks anytime, 24 hours a day. And that's my favorite setup. So yes, you're absolutely welcome. These are all really good questions about this. And this is what I wanted to do today. So we're absolutely on the right page. So keep it up. All right. So let me go back to this again for a second. So when to use a trade copier and when not to. I just want to talk to this for a couple of minutes. And I've given you a couple of examples where when I was copying, it did a lot of damage. I blew up 20 funded accounts once copying because I made a fat finger mistake in one and it went to all 20. And the day after that happened, I adjusted my process. And this is how I adjusted it. I now never will start the day with the copier turned on. My platform, it doesn't even load when I load my platform. It's an option that I have turned off. Then if things are going well and I feel like my read is good and whatever I'm doing is profitable, I'll flip the copier on and I'll start copying, not to 20 accounts, but to 2 or 3 at the same time. And if that's going well, maybe if the tactics are switching or my risk is switching, I'll switch and copy to 2 or 3 different ones. Then, once those have had some money in them. And also I have like a hierarchy. If I don't feel well or the conditions are hard to read, then I'll play in sim or I'll test a new idea or I'll play in an eval. But that's all I'll do when the risk is the highest. Okay. When it's, roughly normal conditions, one way or another, I'll trade evals, funded accounts, my cash accounts. But I'll decide based on each individual setup, which one of those I might be doing and which I might be copying to. When the market's great, and everything's working and my reads are working really good, I will copy much more aggressively, but still I will break it into blocks. So if I have 20 funded accounts, I never will copy to more than 5 of them at the same time, because then the worst thing that can happen catastrophically is everything crashes and I lose 5 of them, but I don't lose all of them. Because the first time that happened, I was like, damn it. I blew the 5 because of the Wi-Fi thing. And this actually happened after that when I blew the 20. And it was just a fat finger error. I just made a mistake where I clicked. And the problem was, if it just blew up one account, it would have been nothing. But because I was copying to all of them, which was just stupid, I just hadn't thought that through. And it's like everything else. You get good judgment from experience by making mistakes. And in the copying world, that was really educational. So, most of you aren't at the step of copying yet, but it's a really, really cool way to increase your leverage and distribute the risk across multiple accounts. And it's also cool that I do this all the time. Like I'll be trading, PA accounts, the quote unquote funded accounts, and I'll copy to one of my cash accounts, so it just builds up there too. And you can do that in Ninja. with Rhythmic, and then the Ninja Trader, Ninja Brokerage. You can do that there. There's a lot of ways you can do it in Sierra. So anyway, so this is one of those things, don't just assume you should be copying or not. Really think about copying and where it might be appropriate and where it's not appropriate. Okay, so anyway, what I just did was kind of review the stuff that we went through, and here's all of our classes. And so I feel like we did a really good job of covering what we intended to cover, but I also completely understand that basically you've gotten, just a taste of a very practice-oriented discipline. And so this is kind of just the beginning. And so one thing I want to call to your attention, I posted in the pit and I bumped it or Lee posted it and I bumped it this morning, but we have a special deal for you guys. And it's right here. So I will kind of just copy this and stick it in the chat. We encourage you to take advantage of that and to join the rest of us at TRG. We have a pretty good little crowd, and I think it's really productive. Also, as I mentioned, personal coaching is available if you're interested. That's what this link is. And then what I'm going to say is, I blocked the whole morning. If there's no other questions, we'll wrap up at the top of the hour between now and then. But I am more than willing to stay here and answer questions or show examples of whatever you might want me to do that with. So let me put it out there. Also, normally we have this ready by now, but again, I hope JVC's okay. We will post a little evaluation in the stream in the pit for you, where you guys can kind of give us feedback on how you like the Scalpathon, what we did well, what we didn't do well. And you can do that either anonymously. We've already given you a way to do that in the Scalpathon stream, but this way, if you want to give us feedback, it's a little form you can fill out if you want to. You don't have to. We will post that just as soon as I get back with JVC and get that organized. What else can I answer? Let me put it this way. What is not clear or what's confusing about what your next step should be? If joining TRG is a good one. Getting your platform set up for this style of trading, if you're interested in this style of trading, is a good one. Those two kind of go together because we can kind of help you do that a little bit. Again, not platform support, but with templates and common problems like the jigsaw thing of not remembering where windows were. We've seen them all. So, and I'm happy to try to help. I'm just not going to spend hours with platform support. You can really go down a rabbit hole with that one. So, and in the pit, there's people always talking about the Sierra chart installations, and I cover Jigsaw and Ninja, JVC, Lee, and a whole lot of other people are Sierra chart experts, and they're posting about that all the time and sharing. If you're trading in Sierra chart, there's some things you need to know that I haven't shown you in the Scalpathon because I don't use them. I can trade on my Sierra chart platform, but I haven't recently. Let's see. That's kind of my whole agenda for the wrap up here. What is necessary jigsaw features do you miss out if you just trade on the Sierra chart dome? That's a great question. And the answer, the one that I would miss the most, is being able to move orders by simply clicking and having the platform automatically know what kind of order that is. And it will also stack if you have 5 separate limit orders together. If I click on a price, let's say I'm trailing a stop, and then I click on the price above that, it groups them all together really quickly for me. So there's no drag and drop necessarily. I can do that too if I want, but on the Sierra Dome, unless you code or make lots of buttons on your toolbars or whatever, you have to drag. And for me, that's a big problem because of my arthritis. My hands can get twitchy and I can make mistakes. And the second thing is it's just really imprecise in MNQ and NQ, and the market's moving really quickly. I can't drag to a price and catch it properly. But on the dome, I can just click on the price out and boom, that order is there. So that's the main reason. And I showed that in a lot of the videos, Idris. When I'm moving orders around, that's what it is for me. Everything else that Jigsaw does, Sierra can do as well. In some cases, even a little better. But that one for me is a game changer as a scalper. I have to have that. Now, if somebody were to make a good scalping dome, that you could add to Sierra or that worked independently, I'd be all over that. Absolutely. And I hear that might be in development in a few places. So yeah, okay. Daniel, I want to recreate your setup alone in Sierra. So I have a question. Is there a trend indicator on your 5-second chart? Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. Yes, there is. And that's shared in the pit. If you look at my 5 seconds, what I'm doing, what's painting these bars is something called, in Ninja, it's called Super Trend. And in the pit, there's a shared equivalent of that's roughly the same. And then my settings for it are also there. So that's not in the Scalpathon part of the pit. And I really need JVC here to answer some of these questions, because where that is that's in members section right now. And that would be under TRG platforms. Or is that? Wait a minute. Is it? Oh wait, no, platforms and software. No, it's not. It's not under TRG anymore. So, but some of the templates might be. So the answer is, if you post that question here in platforms and software, a number of people have worked that out and have some indicators. Whether they will respond to you there or not, I don't know, but I do know there's some examples down in the template section. I'm sure JVC can figure out how to get you access to them, but that's the right. Oh, you are there. Okay. When did you drift in, JVC? I've been talking about, I hope you were okay for a while now. I'll make you a co-host. So anyway, so what I'm doing with Super Trend is I'm using it as an ATR stop, and but I don't use it for that. But that's how the coloring is done. And here's the settings. And again, that's all shared in the pit. JVC, are you with us now? No audio. Okay. All right. Well, don't worry about it. Anyway, you can see my settings here, and then let's. I don't want to get into this in real depth here. Anyway, let's just follow up on this in the pit. Create a question in anything goes there. There you go.
There we go. God, yeah. Finally.
All right. Cool. All right. Again, okay. I don't want to spend much more time on this, but can you follow up on that, JVC, with where they can get access to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything you guys need access to with regards to charts and setup and settings and templates and all that, whatever, ping me and I can point you to where they are.
Cool. All right. I posted mine already. They're in the Scalpathon stream. The one thing, you weren't here when I brought this up earlier. I want to post the completion survey for these guys so they can give us feedback. How we've done that in the past. So maybe we could put a link for that in the Scalpathon stream when you get a chance.
We'll get on that.
Okay, cool. And the only other thing I announced was that I'm going to have to go back, and I think there's a 3-way tie for the question thing, but I'm going to do a post and an email about who the winners were in that. So that's all you missed. Okay, some more questions. Jeff, for clarification, I think in Entei you need the full version to use Supertrend. No, you don't. Supertrend is actually a third-party indicator, and again, I posted it in the pit. I'll post it. Well, you can hang on a second. Just because that one can be tricky to find. I don't want to start doing this with all of my stuff, but I'll tell you what I'll do with that one real fast for the Ninja one. I'll just stick it here. So it's just a study, and I got it from Futures.io, but I'll post it here. And again, all of these are in the TRG streams. We'd love for you guys to join TRG. I'm trying not to force you to do that. That's why I'm trying to share as much stuff as I can. But I'd really like for you to become members. So where the heck did I store that? I thought I had that in my documents. There it is. Okay. Documents. That's it. Okay. Okay, there's the super trend for Ninja. I should note that. Okay, and I will also post my template for it, which is Ninja 8 templates, chart templates. No, wait, we want an indicator template. You can be confusing. We want the indicator template. There it is. And we want TS super trend. Okay, so that is okay, cool. All right. We got that one. Let's see. The main thing I've drawn from Scalpathon is now that I know what I don't know, I'm hopefully out of the Dunning-Kruger phase. I love that. That is so true. That is so true. And it's one of those things where once you realize how much stupidity there is out there, and you do learn what you don't know, then at least the task becomes definable. and you can put a scope on it. So I totally agree with what you just said, Renaud. That's absolutely correct. Okay, let's see. I'm just kind of looking back, see if I missed anything. And I don't think I did. Okay. What other questions or comments might you guys have, or JVC or Lee or anybody else? Put this back. We kind of did let's see. How would you mind sharing how you review trades? Absolutely. I will do that. The way I review trades depends on what I'm doing. And this is such a good question. See, I love questions like this. So this is a great question. All right. It depends. If I am working out a new setup idea or a new trade tactic idea, I actually will journal that, just while I'm playing with it. What am I learning? And I'll do that just on paper. I have a remarkable tablet, you can just handwrite on it. So I do that. I haven't done that in a while, but that's the process for that. When I'm working on practicing a technique and an edge, I use a feature in Jigsaw Journalytics, and I haven't done this again in a while, but it's really cool. I'll show it to you. Hang on one second. I'm going to pause my share for just a second here. And let me get the right window open in Jigsaw, and then I'll show it to you. Okay.
I just put in the chat, by the way, for everybody, a link to the Sierra chart version of the super trend study with Hull moving average.
Okay.
I put it in Scalpathon for you all.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. We appreciate it. Okay. Let me resume my share. Okay. So if you use Journalytics, or if you have Daytrade or Jigsaw, this comes with it, with the live license. And what you can do, whenever you close a trade, this window will pop open. And you can create your own hashtags on the fly by just going hashtag and then whatever the word is, and the ones you've already created will pop up. And you can see some of mine: circuit break, warm up, tick drill, pain, testing, bad entry chasing, stop out proper, stop out moved, bad entry in the middle, bad entry too early, not an extreme. And so that's what I do. I will tag my trades and then go back and review what the mistakes I made were. I don't do this now because I don't make very many mistakes. And when I make them, I know exactly what they are. But when I'm learning a new technique, this is the first place I go. And before this existed, I did something like it in writing and then I would put it in a spreadsheet. But this is so useful because, then I can say, okay, show me all the bad entries that were too early. And, and how did that trade work out? I can see the P&L and what time, how long I was in it, and, what the MAE was. And it's a really powerful way to measure the quality of your execution and where you're making mistakes so that you can improve. So that was a massively good question, and that's how I do it. Now, if you're not using, Jigsaw and Journalytics, I would set something like that up for yourself. And I've done that a few other ways too. There's a couple of apps you can get on your phone that are really good for that. There's one called it's not a journaling app. It's actually a process app. Oh, what the heck is that? That's what I used before I used Journalytics. Wasn't Process Maker. What was that? Process Street. That's the one I used. Process Street is a little app that lets you build little visual models, and then you can use those visual models to track your workflow and then the results of your workflows. Like here's a screen example of one. It's not a very good one, and I can't blow it up very well because it's running some sort of script. But whoops. But yeah, see, here's you can make your own little forms and fill them in on the fly, and you can do it on a tablet or on your phone. And that's what I used to use before I used Journalytics. But there's all kinds of stuff out there. It's the process, the way you're doing it, and the information you're capturing. That's what matters for me. And the idea of being able to just hashtag or check off the mistakes. And, because when you're new, you make the same mistakes over and over again. Like, almost everybody I coach has the same two mistakes at the beginning. One, that their losers are too big because they're afraid to say I'm wrong and just cut a loser short. And then the other one is consistently executing their edge and staying focused on that. And the first one is always the hard one to, getting them to not make big losers, and then staying in the edge and focusing on it. And to do those two things, you're typically just making one or two mistakes over and over again. And so this helps you learn not to do that. Good question. Okay, there's the super trend link. Awesome. So we've got that. Good questions. All right. So what else can we do for you? A good chunk of the Scalpathoners are here. So if I'm not thinking of something else we should be doing in our wrap up, JVC or Lee, let me know. I think I've covered all the things that we needed to cover, but this is your last full-time free Ask Me Anything. I will stay here as long as you have questions session. So, is there anything else you want to know? Oh, great. God, Kelvin, you're coming up on the great questions. I'm going to have to reassess the prizes. I might need to do a four-way split here. Replay. I think replay is at best dubiously valuable, and I'll tell you why in a second. And at worst, very, very distracting from real life practice. Here's why. If you're in the market routinely, pretty much every day, then anything you see in replay, your brain's already seen. You may not remember it, but your brain probably does. So thinking you can practice using replay, particularly if it's something you've already seen, I just personally don't think that there's any truth whatsoever to that statement. I think your brain is remembering cues, and so it's going to be very deceptive. So that's my view on using it that way. And I think where it can be valuable is if you want to go back and recreate something that you can't, see in real time going forward, to set up, what exactly was going on at that point in time, to answer a question or something. I think it can be useful for that, but I don't have any of my platforms set up to do replay. In every one of them you can do it, and you have to, turn it on and store the data or whatever. And it is disabled on every one of my platforms. Now, again, other people may not be as aggressive on that statement, but I don't, in TRG, there isn't a lot of replay usage. I don't think Lee's a huge fan. I don't think JVC is a big fan. I don't think any of the members are big users of it. I haven't heard much of it.
I'm a big fan of it, but not for what most people want to use it for, which is if I learn to trade on replay, then I will be able to trade live markets. And they at least what I see is there's that. And then the other one, of course, is if I can back test something in replay, whatever it does in the past, it will do in the future, which of course is utterly nonsensical. Both of those things are completely wrong. And that's where most people, and myself included, start with approaching replay. We think that the past is going to play out the same way. Now I know I don't think that way at all anymore, but I use replay all the time to explore possible ideas of, is there something to a particular range, or what is the behavior around a certain time of day, or is an idea just completely and totally dumb? And usually a replay will show where, that will never work because it's so obvious now that I see it playing out, stuff like that. But any idea that what you learn out of replay, you're going to be able to apply as far as like how to trade, execution, improving your MAE, whatever, anything like that. No way.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Okay, let's see. Maybe for open or exit, I mean, session open and close, or to see how the market. Yeah, again, if you're doing research backwards and the way JVC, absolutely useful for that. In fact, when I used to trade the Open 5, when I was learning my Open 5 setup, I ran it all the time in Ninja back, gosh, this is like 2015, because I wanted to watch the behavior over and over again so that I could establish some ways to trade it. But I wasn't misled into thinking that, well, if I can make money in replay with the Open 5, I can do it. It just doesn't work like that. And I'm really not kidding when, if you're in the market every day and you've seen the reaction to something, and then you go back and practice in replay, I guarantee your brain remembers it. Brains are really good at that. And a really good book about the things that your brain does that you don't know it's doing, that was written by a neuroscientist trader, is called Between the Hour of the Dog and the Wolf. And this is a really good book about this topic. So if you want to dig more into this thing, I strongly recommend this book right here. It is one of the best books, in my opinion, written about trading and the psychology of trading and how it works. I'm trying to bring up the blow. There we go. Go back to the cover. There we go. Bite me, Amazon.
I think it's because you had previously read down past the cover, and so it's we'll take you back to where you were.
Exactly. That's it. Anyway, this is a really good book about this.
And Samuel mentioned, and I said it in the chat, but I'll say it for the purpose of the recording as well. I forgot to mention that replay is actually really good when you're getting comfortable with your platform, trying to learn what buttons to push and figure out your hotkey mappings or what you click when, all of that stuff. Yes, of course. Learn that stuff. You get all those kinks in your execution process out in replay, where it costs you nothing when you make the inevitable massive, oops, I totally clicked the wrong thing or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with that. You may think that your mind doesn't remember what happened 2 months ago, Samuel. I guarantee you it does. If you saw
it's a subconscious thing.
Yeah. You got to read this book. It'll blow your mind what your mind can do. That we routinely see examples of our brains doing things that are literally impossible. You can't get an input through your eyes to your brain and back to your hand, or some way to react, yet the body does it all the time. How is that possible? You got to check this book out. And
what's intuition?
Yeah, exactly. I see it all the time in my life. I mean, I gave somebody an example about this a couple of weeks ago. I was in the kitchen and I was holding something in my hand, and it slipped out, and I wasn't even looking at it. And I reached down and I caught it before it hit the floor. And I'm 63 years old. I have really fast reactions. I was a sprinter in high school and college, and I know that. I've known that my whole life. But I don't know how the hell I did. I wasn't even looking at it. It slipped out of my hand. I reached down and I grabbed it before it hit the floor. And my friend was in the room, and she looked at me. She's like, "What did you just do?" I said, "What?" She said, "You dropped that and you caught it and you weren't even looking at it." I said, "I did." I mean, I didn't even know I had done it. It was so weird. And things like that happen all the time. The brain is unique in many ways we don't understand. But it's
your brain
did
your brain did a real-time calculation on the weight of the object, where the height was when it dropped, how fast it would likely have been traveling, how quickly you're going to have to move your hand to intercept that object, how quickly you'll have to grasp in order to catch it without slipping. I mean, the calculus is insane. You have no idea that you even did it.
And I wasn't even looking at it. I was looking at her. So it was peripheral vision that I barely have, because I had a stroke when I was 27 and I lost most of my peripheral vision. So it's really interesting stuff. Let's see. There was something else I wanted to mention about this too. If I remember it, I'll remember it. Okay, so good comments, good questions. What else can we answer for you? I think, if I were to just, make it really simple, what the next steps would be were I you. If I joined the Scalpathon and I saw this stuff, and, the first thing I'd do is I'd try to get any platform set up so that I could at least start following the ideas. And then I would do that. I'd start following the ideas and play a little bit with it. Try trading some ledge breaks in the sim. Try trading the open 5. You set up the opening 15 minutes on your 5-second chart, and when we get there, look at it and say, okay, which way is this likely to break? Remember the statistic, it's really high, 87% or so. And can I take that trade? That's the one that's the most visual. And if we're going to have an opening drive and have the market go one way, for the first few hours, that trade catches the entry to it really well, because that's usually where that trade starts. The opening drive trade starts. So that's a really good one. And, and pick one. Don't try to do it all. We were teasing somebody in the pit about this, besides these ranges, what ranges should I watch? How many do you need? I wasn't being critical, and, nor was Lee. We were just saying, look, the key to this game is not learning 10,000 kicks, as Bruce Lee said. It's practicing one kick 10,000 times. That's where you get dangerous. And every success story we have in TRG, that's what they did. We know that works. So, we're not emphasizing it just because we want to emphasize it.
I'll add to that for those who are in TRG or those who are thinking of joining TRG, there's I think of it as like there's that all you can eat buffet. There's so many different things to try within TRG, all the different setups and approaches and styles and tweaks, and there's so much. And at the very, very outset, the very, very beginning, I totally recommend do it all, try it all, play, experiment, explore it, because you have even the things that you're already convinced that's not going to be for me. I'm not going to like that. Do it anyway. Try it all. But as quickly as you reasonably can, recognize what's resonating with you and what's not, and start to focus as quickly as you can. You don't want to do that stage for too long. You do want to do it at the beginning, but it shouldn't just be an eternal student kind of thing. You don't want to do that. You want to pick something that starts to really just whatever grabs you, whatever starts to just like that feels right for me for whatever the reason, even if you don't know what the reason is, if it just feels good, focus there, start to go that direction. Yeah,
exactly. So good question in the pit. Did I pass the Scalpathon account? Not quite. We're at about 7,100, I think, is the balance on, and it's a $9,000 target. It's a 150. So, no, not quite. But I think probably in the next few days, I'm still battling being sick, which hit about a week ago, and so I haven't pushed as much. If you noticed, I've been posting my trades. The numbers are smaller, the quantity of trades, the size, and that's just a natural adjustment. I rarely don't trade at all, but when I'm feeling good, I'll trade a lot. You'll see, a day where I might do, 1,000 trades. And, in the last couple of days I did, 50, 100, 150, 200, it's lower numbers for me. So, but I will keep you guys posted on that. I will look, you guys, the Scalpathon stream isn't going to go away right away. We'll keep it up for a while. And I'll, if it passes, I'll post the certificate in there, and I'll let you guys know. And I hope to do that this week. Have some personal stuff I have to get through, and some people to shuttle around. And so I don't know how much I'll be able to focus if I stay sick, but I promise I will try, and I will keep the results up to date. Okay, let's see. Did we miss any other questions? I think we are caught up. I'm just going to scroll back and look. Oh, I think we got them all. Okay, so thank you, everybody. It's always an honor and a privilege to be able to do these kinds of things. And, I have one wish. I just hope that, again, if one person out of the 45 of you or whatever is able to convert what you've learned into some sort of income for yourself, then I've achieved my objective, and that makes my day. That's what this is about for me. I realized something a couple of days ago. This is just a quick personal aside, but I was doing something that I enjoy doing, kind of a little hobby, but my life, trading is really my world. I mean, there's other things I do. And I've done lots of interesting things, racing and all that. But for some reason, as I've gotten older, I spend a lot of time, not because I can't go anywhere. I'm still physically strong and all, but I spend a lot of time just sitting outside and watching the trees and listening to the birds at the sunrise. And the thing that starts to happen, and I some of my peers understand this, and if you get into this age group or you are in this age group, maybe you will, the things that are worth doing with your time start to become fewer and fewer, because there's things you like, and a lot of the world is just a pain in the ass, and there's a lot of crap going on in the world right now. And so this is a really it's a really important thing for me to hopefully be able to impact your world positively with respect to this. That's why we try to make our courses as reasonable as they are and our membership as reasonable as it is. We could try to be really exclusive and charge 100 times more. And there are people that do that. And, that might be a better business model, but it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't help anybody else out as directly. And that's just really important to me. So thank you. I appreciate you guys being here and attendance in the live sessions and the great questions. And I hope we can achieve that for you. I hope you can be one of the ones that can get yourself on that path. All right. So we have two things we owe you. We will post a little end of the class, end of the Scalpathon survey for you to give us feedback if you'd like to. And we also, if you're interested in personal coaching, again, that is on the website. You can go there, or you can just email me directly. That works as well. And in fact, let me give you my email address for this particular purpose. You can always communicate with me. I have a variety of email addresses like most people, but this is the one that I would suggest for that. So, whoops, trying to just get to a place I can copy it easily. The Zoom meeting is a good spot. There we go. That's what I was trying to do. When you have rheumatoid arthritis, you like to point and click a lot, because when I go to type, my fingers sometimes just don't show up for the conversation. So that is my email address. Feel free to reach out to me directly. Again, there's no charge for us to talk, and we'll see if there's common ground. And a couple of you already have, and don't worry, I will get back to you. I just wanted to wait till after we got through today. So you will hear from me by the early part of the week at the latest. Let's see. Great. Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. You guys were great. I just, this, like I said, when you got something out of it, it makes my day. It makes my year. So thank you, JVC, for getting up religiously with us for the overnight sessions. I truly respect you did that, and I know you didn't have to do that. So I wanted to make a point to thank you for that. And also, if I'm not mistaken, isn't like in a day or so, isn't it JVC's birthday? Am I remembering that?
Monday.
Whoa. And
the big 5-0.
Oh, is this? I was going to ask you, is this the 5-0? Wow.
Yep, it is a weird number.
Yeah. So 550 for me was a really weird one. And Lee and I had this conversation not too long ago, because he's not that far away from that. That's the point in your life where the synthesis of your life experience, wisdom, and having enough of a brain to be able to figure out what to do with it, that's when that starts.
Finally.
Seriously. Yeah, you're between 50 and 60, in my opinion, that's the optimal time for that, where you still have most of your faculties, but you've got enough life experience you can really start to figure the world out. And, then you get into your 60s like me, and you can still do that, but now, shit's starting not to work. So, and that doesn't happen in your 50s as much. So enjoy your 50s. That's, in my opinion, that is the best, most productive time of your life. I totally think that. Okay, let's see. Alfredo, Jeff, every time the course is becoming, oh, thank you. That is so nice. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I know you've been a member a long time, and Maria as well. And, again, when you guys make those comments, you totally make my day. So thank you. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up. Thank you, Idris. I really do appreciate that. So, we achieved our objectives, and that makes me happy, because look, this business it's like nothing else. We have and I'll wrap up with this. This is trading, okay? Trading is the only profession where you can go to work your butt off all day, and come home with less money than you started with. That's a problem. Okay. That's a problem. That's called managing risk and learning how the game works over time. You might have 5 days like that in a row. You might have a month like that in a row. But the other side of trading, and this is what's so cool about it, is that there's absolutely no limit. It's a total meritocracy. You didn't have to go to Harvard. You didn't have to grow up rich. You don't need $1 million account. You just have to show up, build a good process, and work your butt off. And you can be as rich as you want to be. There is no industry that I am aware of that has absolutely no entry barriers and has no limits to your earnings except trading. If you know one, let me know, because I've said that now for years to people and nobody's ever said, but what about that? There is nothing like this. And that's really cool. But, you have to understand the game. You're not going to get rich quick and buy a Lamborghini in 6 weeks. It's not going to happen. And if it does, you're going to lose more money and give it back. You have to really understand the game, but this game is unique, and there's nothing like it, and it's the coolest thing in the world.
There's never been a better time. I mean, the tools we have access to. Oh my God! I mean, just 5-10 years ago. It was night and day from today. It's crazy.
When I started the workshop, and when we did the 2019 workshop, we didn't have the tools we have today.
Yeah,
it's amazing, and now throw in the opportunity that these evaluator, funding accounts, quote unquote, but not really prop firms, you're buying leverage for nothing. And so it is the best time ever to be doing this, but it's also competitive. You're up against the best in the world. I love posting this thing, and I'll leave us with this. This was, I showed you guys at the beginning of the Scalpathon. This is from Trader Dante, the hardest game, he called it. And he's a really good follow on Twitter if Twitter lasts long enough to make it worthwhile. Oh, where is that? I'm trying to skip. There it is. Hardest
search
game.
on Dante. Oh, there we
go. There it is. Welcome to the hardest game in the world. Unfortunately, you're playing with some of the sharpest, fastest, most intelligent, well-informed, stubbornly irrational, in many cases, unethical minds in the world. This is just so good. Read this and take it to heart. This is the game. I have a summary of it on my desk right now. I make little 3x5 cards and I use them as reminders. And this one says, trade the game of the PAs. The PAs are not the market. Talking about the funded accounts, performance accounts. They're a game, and you're following the rules of the game to get money, but they're not the market. Remember that. It's a slightly different set of rules, and it's a great game. But, you don't treat your cash accounts that way, but you don't have to, because you've got all this leverage in these eval accounts and these PAs. So, all right. Thank you again, everybody. We will leave you with the wise words of Trader Dante. And I'll ask one more time, JVC, anything you want to add? Again, thank you for all of your efforts, as usual. They are
no problem. Nothing else from me. And sorry I was late today. I just it was Saturday.
Yeah, I almost did that too. So no worries at all. Okay, everybody. Thank you. We will see you in the pit. And again, we owe you two things: the feedback quiz, which you can do or not. It's up to you. And then I will be posting winners for the gift cards, and there's going to be more than one. And I will do that by Monday morning at the latest. Okay. We're done. Thank you. We'll get the recording up, and we'll see you guys later. Please take advantage of the offer to join TRG. We'd love to have you, and I think it's a real good deal. All right. We're out of here.